So, one thing that I say about books is that they're probably more useful for personal branding than they are for making money.
Okay, and so by the way, I'm here with Tim Lewis, who is my Londoner friend in the UK, but he's actually in the US right now,
Yes.
and because he's a world traveler and he's been to far more states than I've ever been to. But it's so awesome to have him with us for our pro book writing tips for personal branders. This is a part of the Hello Spring Challenge. So we're on day 4 of the Hello Spring Challenge Personal Brand Edition. And I'm here with Tim Lewis, who is with Stoneham Press. And Tim, would love for you to share a little more about that statement, because you've written, is it 7 books now? This is one of them, by the way.
Yes, that's the last book I wrote. So, yes.
Social media networking, which is amazing. How to use social media to get the job you want, to find love, get business success, and boost your travel experience. I mean, this is everything everybody wants. So.
Well, the funny thing is that that book is probably the best in terms of branding of the books I've written.
Oh, yeah.
Historically, I started off writing time travel books, actually, just time travel fiction. So, and then I did some fantasy books, and that was my first non-fiction book. Now, I'm not suggesting that for most business people they should write time travel or fantasy books for branding purposes. But writing a book about something that you know you have knowledge in or a topic can be fantastic as a way of establishing a branding presence, because an awful lot of people don't do it. I mean, with any kind of branding, if you can do the work to do something that you can show, and that could be a book, that could be a live show, that could be a podcast, that could be basically anything. But obviously, there is still a cachet about books, especially physical books, and they're not particularly hard to create now. So,
Yeah.
as it say, you've got a copy of my book behind you. That
Yeah.
anybody can produce a paperback book now. In fact, anybody can produce a hardback book and make it, upload it onto Amazon. It's available for purchase. So it doesn't have to necessarily. In fact, I think, coming back to the original statement, books are not really, in general, a very good way of making money.
Mhm.
From my experience, there are only 2 kinds of people who make money from books. There are people who write almost industrially long series of books about, say, zombie apocalypse. It's usually in the fiction realm, and they just churn out a book a month, either romance or fantasy or something. And they're very, very hardworking, diligent people, and they build up a long following, and they write long series of books where people buy book 1 and then they want to buy book 2 to find out what happened to the vampire romance thing they were found out in about book 1, etc. up to
Right.
12, 13, 14. There are people in the self-publishing world who are making lots of money doing that kind of thing, but that is all they do. They're not doing any other stuff. They're not doing any online business. So for most other people, the way they make money from books is indirectly. It's not from the sales of their books. It's from people finding them via the book and then spending money on their courses, hiring them as a consultant, hiring them as a speaker, doing that kind of thing. And that's, I mean, that book, I spoke at Cambridge Social Day on the back of that book. So
Okay.
just from having a book and being able to say that is a way to be able to get opportunities and to make money further down the stream. So for most people, I guess, watching your show, it's that second way. They're not going to become zombie fiction writers. They're going to have a book, and that book may not sell that many copies. They may have to give away copies of that book. But again, that's not necessarily especially bad. And you can go to conferences and events and give out your book or sell your book to people. Most people are quite happy to buy your book if they're interested in the topic. And that gives you that kind of social proof, so to speak, that your book
Yeah.
is very useful. So hopefully it's helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And so I love that you're mentioning that the books are, and if you're just joining us, we're talking about book writing and how that could potentially really catapult your personal brand. And so we're talking with Tim Lewis, who is my friend from London and also the host of Oh No, Not Another Live show
Yeah.
and more shows. What's your show on Amazon Live?
My show on Amazon Live is Book Chat Live. And
Book Chat Live, correct?
what I do is I talk to authors and other people who are avid readers about their favorite books. I get a very small affiliate cut. So I've actually found a lot of really good books from hosting that show. So yeah, it's very much book related. So most of the stuff I've done is historically is in the book realm. Now I'm slightly moving more towards the social media side, but yeah, it's like I do know a lot about books because I've been involved in this whole kind of area since about 2014.
Awesome.
What about ebooks? Well, ebooks and paperback books are, in my mind, are much more similar than people online. The trouble is, there are a lot of people who, historically, who say a PDF or just some free download is a book, is an ebook, and that's not really true, strictly speaking. An ebook is something that you can download onto a Kindle or a Kindle app. That's kind of, in the publishing world, what the definition of an ebook would. It's not some downloadable freebie book you would get because you sign up for an email list. So it's the same interface now to publish an ebook as it is to publish a paperback book. There are differences in the formatting, so that's how it's laid out and how it moves, but not necessarily the content can be the same. The only slight advantage you can get with ebooks is obviously links. You can link out more easily. You can't have, well, I mean, you've got QR codes you can have in a book, but in general, it's easier to click a link on an ebook. There are some formatting things you can do on ebooks, obviously, you can't do. And the main reason often that ebooks, generally people accept shorter books as ebooks, but even with a paperback book, it doesn't need to be that long, really. I mean, 20 or 30,000 words can make it a reasonable paperback book.
Okay. Yeah. So that's interesting because like I've written little ebooks, but I've done the other version you're talking about that are like just for lead magnets so that we can get the emails, so we can get people who should be our ideally target audience we want to speak to on our email list. So we give them that, what we call lead magnets in exchange for an email address. So this challenge has a little ebook everyone will get tomorrow. But it's not the ebook in the sense that you are talking about. Yeah.
Well, there's no, I mean, you've probably done the hard work of writing. The hard part is writing the book. It's writing the content. It's not the production or how it's distributed. So yeah, you could in effect create a paperback book probably off the same thing. I'm not sure you want to, but yeah, in my mind there is a difference there. It's a bit of a finicky kind of what's the right? It's a very minor difference, but in my mind, an ebook is something that you have as an electronic version of a book, either Kindle, read on a Kindle kind of app, or Kobo, or one of those other things, not just downloadable.
Yes, because you can't just throw a regular PDF into a Kindle and expect it to take it, because it has to be formatted the way they need it.
Well, also, like, the irony is PDF is a print format. So PDF is the format you give if you want to print out a book. So yeah, it's funny. I mean, that is a thing. That's why a lot of these downloadables are very good, because you put them and then print them out and read them that way. But they're not really an ebook per se. They're just an electronic version of a printable file. But we're getting a bit in the weeds there about the difference.
Yes, and if you're just joining, I just want to reintroduce to you Tim Lewis, who is with Stonehand Press, and he's written like 7 books, including this one, Social Media Networking, which is pretty awesome. And earlier we're talking about how writing a book could potentially boost really boost your personal brand. And so you were talking about how writing a book, really the value in it is not so much the cash money from selling the books itself. It's more so the opportunities it creates because you've written that book. So thinking of like the opportunities, it can talk to me specifically about speaking. So, you've seen speakers, they're selling their books in the back. Like, how do you see that helping out from a personal brand perspective?
Well, I mean, if you talk to a lot of organizers of events, and I also, as my role as like interviewing people on podcasts and live shows and the rest, and looking for guests, often somebody will be interested in a topic. They won't necessarily be interested in a person. So they might be like, oh, it's Andrea. But we like her, but we don't really. But they may be looking for, say, like at the moment, if you wrote a book on ChatGPT, and I know there's probably a lot of people writing books on ChatGPT and AI, but a well-formatted book that people read and was helpful to them, you would get so many interview and conference opportunities at the moment, because that's where people are looking for that topic. But a lot of the time, it can be that people are in a particular niche and running a conference for some sort of industry thing, and they'll do a search on Amazon for a particular book topic, and then they'll get in touch with you and do it that way. Obviously, with all of these things, if you do it passively, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody, if you just wait around for people to come and approach you, that goes to a certain level. But you can be much more active and go out and send copies of your book to people and say, like, are you looking for ChatGPT in the Atlanta area book that I've just written? That's a bit of a stupid example, but you know what I mean. That is how books can be really, really powerful, because it is it's a hurdle that a lot of people don't write that book, especially if they're an expert in a topic. Now, obviously, if you've got a podcast or a radio show or some other thing, you can use that potentially as a way of getting in. But most people understand, and a book is higher on the social proof level than a podcast or a show. It's ways of demonstrating what you already know, really, and that's where a book is very useful.
Right. So for people who want to be industry experts, that's a great way to showcase your knowledge and expertise. And then you're talking about it on stage. And so to your point about the opportunities for being interviewed, getting some press coverage that way. And so you're so right about ChatGPT, even though anyone writing a book right now their whole book's going to be so obsolete in like a month. But
well, but I mean, the thing is, you can publish a book very quickly. Whether you want to is a whole nother matter. I suppose we should talk about how you write a book.
That would be great.
Now, there's a couple of ways I have done it. With that last book, I actually interviewed 20 people. Most of the book is interviews of other people. And I recorded those interviews, and then I got them transcribed and then edited in, and then I added comments at the beginning and the end. So it's basically, you've got your content on one side, and then you need to get that into a form that is available as a book. I've always, with book writing, I found writing a plan for a book helps a lot. So even if that is just, I've got a chapter on how I found out about ChatGPT. I don't know why I'm using this terrible example.
And then
one on prompts, and then one on thing. Because the way that I've written books most successfully, and I didn't actually do it with that book, but is I have a plan and I add details to the plan, and then I try and write the whole book in one go, the first draft. And that may take a week or 2 weeks or whatever. So shift everything else aside and write that first write the first draft once you have the plan to a level that you're happy with. So you know the structure of the book. Because there are
let me
two.
ask you this, Tim.
Yeah.
So with that length, though, so to get something knocked out in a week or two, that's very impressive to me. So, but how long of a book are you thinking in about that time for you, if you were to take a week or two to hash out that first draft?
Well, I wrote, I mean, admittedly, the time travel books I wrote, they were like about 20,000 words. I wrote one of them in a week. Now, a lot of it depends on your typing ability or how you do it. One thing is to not worry about editing. Don't worry about grammar, anything. Just get that first draft out.
Mm-hmm.
Because at least for me, and I think this is true for most people, there's a time delay in if you write like a chapter, if you write 10 pages of a book, say, and then a month later you write another 10 pages, you are going to spend a long time. You're going to have to reread those 10 pages, and then you're going to have to kind of get back into the mindset you had when you started writing those 10 pages. And there's lots of joining up, and then you'll be tempted to edit that first 10 pages because you have to reread it to find out what those first 10 pages are about. You can see there's lots of overhead in coming back to a project.
Mm.
That's why it's often easier to do that in the planning stage, where it's like, okay, you've got to go back and you might spend ages doing the plan. And this is something I'm very guilty of myself. But at least if you've got a plan, plan may only be like a couple of pages. It's not a lot to extra. And also, you'll be making big changes probably to the plan. The plan is helpful because it means that you have that way to finish the project. Because the trouble is, if you just say, I'm going to write a book, and like next week, I'm going to write a book, but you haven't really got any idea of the structure of that book, what's going to happen is you're going to go, man, blah, 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 and then you'll get stuck because you won't know where you're going with the book. So that's where the plan is helpful. So you know what you're talking about, you know enough. And you don't have to follow the plan. I mean, sometimes this is especially true with fiction. Sometimes an idea will come into your head and you'll be like, oh, I'll change the plan as going along. But at least you've got a way to get to the end, to know what the structure is going to be. So that's kind of for me, that's the most successful way that I've written books.
I think that's great and super helpful. I think some people call that other method pantsers, kind of writing by the seat of your pants and trying to figure it out that way versus having the plan laid out before.
Yeah.
As you may know, I've been working on the Scotland book forever and ever, shamefully forever, ridiculously forever. So for those of you who don't know about that project, it's a memoir about my time working and living in Scotland for a year before I came here to Atlanta. And was not even going to write that book at all. It was at the request of a client of mine at the time who pretty much was like, oh, that's a dream of yours? Do it. And I want to see chapter 1 by the beginning of the year, which was at that time in a few weeks. And so that is what kicked this off. Ironically, that's also how, similar path to how this whole business ever even got started, that I've got someone was like, here's some money, I'm going to be a client, start your business.
Yeah.
People pushing you, right? But what's so interesting is that even that process of writing the Scotland book, I don't think I had at first had to have the outline because it was a memoir and I'm going off of memory.
Yeah.
But now that I'm in it, I do see that I'm going back and doing because I did get stuck, like you said, even though it's a memoir, you would think, what's so hard about that? Because you lived it. So shouldn't it be easy just to write down what you remember? But now I'm thinking of it like a screenplay, almost like I'm watching a movie and I want to capture people's attention that way. And so now I'm like, maybe I should do this scene first and then this scene. And so now I am doing that outline and going back, and it's helping me get unstuck. So I see how that process works. Yeah.
There is a balance between those two. Like
Yeah.
you could spend too long. You can do almost an outline that is the book, and you can do like too little of an outline. It's
Mm.
probably more useful in fiction in a way, because it really is hard to write a story where you don't know what the ending is,
Mhm.
or you don't know what the beginning is. You can get away with the middle not being quite sure. But if you don't know where you're gonna go, and you don't know where you're starting, it's quite hard. A lot of non-fiction books now are very story-based, though. There's an awful lot of people who are writing story-based. Well, I mean, as I say, a memoir is story-based non-fiction book in a way.
Mhm.
But even for business books, a lot of them are story-based now, because people like stories. That's kind of something to relate to.
Yes.
The other thing is that if you're quote not a writer, you're not somebody who likes writing, then there are approaches. As I say, you can do it using audio. Just record, especially with the massive improvement in quality of voice to text services lately. Record the audio and get it transcribed. It will cost you more, but that is a way. If you're not somebody who feels you can't write, because I don't know about you, for a lot of, a typical hour-long podcast, you can get like 10, 15,000 words out of that. So if you think about it, if you just sit and talk for an hour and a couple of hours, that could be your first draft.
Yeah.
So that is an option. There are things, obviously, to bear in mind, that speech is very different when you see it transcribed to what a book is. So it needs more editing, but that is a way to get your first draft done if you're not somebody who's very good at writing, or for some reason you can't type, or you've got an injury or something. You can do a lot of stuff just with audio.
That's a good tip. So if you feel like you can speak it out better than you can type it out, maybe try that, recording yourself, and then and also that might also show you how boring it is.
Well, yeah.
You listen to it and you're like, it's kind of boring. Then you know what you have to do to spice it up and make it a little more interesting for people.
Yeah. And that's it. Most of us have so much content, though. It's funny, in the last 5 years or so, we've gone from, it used to be most social media and online business advice was produce content, produce content, produce content. And it was starting off, write blog posts, because there weren't enough people writing blog posts. Then everybody started writing blog posts. Then it was like, create podcasts, because there weren't enough people getting podcasts. Now there are hundreds of podcasts all over about everything. Then it was like live video. And you see how it keeps going on. And there's an element of books as well. There are people who've written books just because they feel they should write a book. The problem is now that people are producing content for content's sake. And most of us have too much content. It's gone the other extreme.
Interesting.
But a lot of that content for the blog posts and the video, a lot of those could be the basis of a book. The information in those shows could be a basis of a book. That's another way, because most of us have already done this work. If you've done like a live show with 50 episodes, there are going to be enough. Just watch your old shows back again and make note of all the lessons that keep coming through. And that's the basis of a book. And possibly record it. Just record it and then get it transcribed. And that's your first draft. Now, there is a kind of expectation quality-wise with books that they should be edited properly. So obviously, the first draft, that should go nowhere near Amazon.
I call it the fugly first draft.
Yeah,
because it typically is pretty fugly.
Go through, but there is something psychological about having that first draft completed that at least for me, and I think this is true for most people, will mean that you will finish the book eventually. So you would reread that through, And then possibly you could use text to speech to have it read it back to you. And that will pick up a lot of weird, because there's lots of weird errors that you miss when you read, that when you listen to it, it's like, oh, I used the wrong spelling of witch or whatever, something like that. Or it just sounds wrong. And then you probably want to hire an editor or find somebody who's an editor or can do the editorial work for you to go through it. And then there's proofreading and formatting and various other ways you can help with getting the book out there. But the hardest part in my mind is writing that first draft, really. That's, for most people, it's the hardest part.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we've got most business owners have got so much content out there and so many, they've already done all the ideas, they've already done the work. I mean, if you're starting brand new, like the start of the year with a new business, then you're gonna, you might have more issue trying to work out how to write content. But a lot of people have created a lot of content over the years on social media, blog posts, live shows, whatever.
Yeah.
They already know they need to boil down what they've learned from those things and and then make a book out of that, and that can then be the thing that they use as the branding tool.
Well, talk to me, Tim, about, because earlier you mentioned about maybe a book being able to help support like an online course or vice versa. You know, someone hears you speak, they know you have a book, and then they end up getting your course. Is that because the book helps promote the course? Like in your book, you're talking about your course and then there's links there, or how do you see that playing out?
Well, I mean, I think that is, in a way, a book can be part of a funnel, using the old marketing thing. So, I mean, I don't know if your audience are marketing, they probably are marketing focusing, because I know you're quite marketing savvy, but.
Well, they're all over. They're personal branders and some are.
Well, let's say we have a course on ChatGPT. Well, we use this terrible example. People could come and just randomly off the internet search, and your site comes up, and that's one way of finding it. But for most of the time, you can have the best course on a topic or the best book or thing. People won't find it. So what happens is that people use tools, or they might pay for Facebook ads, for example, or some way there's a wide range of people who are interested in it, and it's getting those people in all the way to buy your course. But that journey is a big journey for somebody to do in one go, especially if your course is expensive. So something that's like a $300-400 course, for example, it's a big ask to have somebody who hasn't had much of a relationship with you to go and buy that product.
Right. Yeah.
But let's say they see you they go to a conference and they see you talking about ChatGPT, and then you're like, I've got this book about this thing, and I'm selling it here. It's not a big thing for them. If they think, oh, that's interesting, I think this guy's good, or this girl's good, they buy the book, and that's like free. That's $5, $6, up $10, whatever cost it is.
Right.
That's not a big ask to buy the book of the person. Or they might go onto Amazon and buy the book after seeing them speak. Right. Or they might see them interviewed on a show somewhere. And it's those little bits. And then in the book, it could be like, oh, I've read the book, but I actually want a bit more. So then they could go to your website and find, oh, we've got a course. And then it's not that big a thing. As you're right in saying, though, that you really should probably mention it in your book, because that's going to make it easier to get from the book to the course. But yeah, as you can see, it's just another level on that marketing journey, and it's one that people assume the book is the end of the journey, and I think it's actually much better to have the book as
a beginning,
the step beyond, the step before the big ticket item that you're trying to sell. Because if you like 1 in 10 people buy a big ticket item based on buying your book, you could give your book away. I mean, it's such a good way of.
It's a marketing tool. Then it becomes a marketing tool. I heard someone say that you're writing a book is a bit like a very nice business card.
Yeah,
because now they've got some of your genius and your IP with them, and even if they never read it, but they heard you speak, and then they got the book and they scrolled through it and they were like, probably knows what he's talking about. then they go connect with you because they liked something about it. To your point, it's just layering on the steps of touch points with someone to build them to familiarity. So that book is a great first step, a little warm intro into your world, and to your point, into your funnel, and then they're all yours from there to handle as you like. Interesting. Very cool. Very cool. I like these tips, Tim. And if you are just joining or you're watching the replay, I do have one of Tim's 7 books he's written here with me, which I cannot believe I don't have your signature on this book. I will have to do it with me the next time. But Tim Lewis wrote this book, Social Media Networking, and it's about how to use social media to get the job you want, find love, and get business success and boost your travel experience, because he's a very avid traveler. So this is really cool, and I love that it feels so good. It reminds me of my my business cards that have that nice velvety feel. And so there's so much more we could chat about, Tim, but I also know you're probably a weary traveler right now.
Yes, jet lag is an issue at the moment.
Jet lag is real. I know. So I will let you go. But before we go, definitely tell people how they can reach out to you and leave us with your best thought towards you could do self-publishing or book writing as a personal brander for those who will watch this on the replay and live.
Well, people can find me at stoneandpress.com or Stone and Press on Twitter, or connect with me at Tim Lewis on LinkedIn. It's always really hard to find me on LinkedIn, but you connect with me on Twitter as Stone and Press. Also, I'm on Instagram. If you're interested in my travel journeys, then follow me on Stone and Press on Instagram, and you'll see me flitting around the US. I'm trying to visit another 6 states of the US this trip, and I'll be up to 46 states. I'm going to finally this year finish all 50 states of the US that I visited.
I know the pandemic messed you up a little bit.
I know it was. I was going to do it before I was 50. 50 states are 50, but I've already had my 50th birthday now. But I will do it by the end of my 50th year, so I think that counts.
It definitely counts.
Regarding the book as a branding tool, I mean, I would say one thing that I haven't mentioned is that it's very easy to do this badly. It's very easy. I've seen a lot of people also that there tends to be this hubris that people create a book because somebody say, oh, you should write a book about whatever you're an expert in. And then the book doesn't sell many copies and people are like, oh, they don't mention the book ever again because they're embarrassed because they hear all of this stuff about people making millions and books. And most of that's basically twaddle, really.
Yeah.
Most books don't sell that many copies. But that doesn't mean if you sell 6 copies of your book and those 6 people are all conference organizers in your area, or they're people who will pay you £10,000 to do your massive course, it doesn't matter if you sell 6 copies of your book in total. If you're going to make $6,000 from people buying your courses. So that is one thing to say. Don't be dispirited if your book doesn't sell, because that's not really, for this kind of book, that's not what it's about. It's not about just general sales. It's about that whole funnel thing. You still need to push people towards the book, and that might involve you giving the physical copies of the book away, ordering copies of the book and giving them to the right people. So don't get discouraged and think that I'm going to become an Amazon bestseller or whatever, because Amazon bestseller can mean that you're number 1 in Japanese networking business books or something.
This really tiny category, right?
I know. Yes. I with that book, I put it in a Kansas travel category on Amazon to show that it was a number 1. It was a number 1 bestseller book, which you could be if you sold 1 copy, because that category is so niche. I keep seeing it with people saying it, because there's also a new release Amazon chart. So you can find like communication, LinkedIn, and then it's like 30-day new release chart. Well, it's like, yeah, you're number one on that chart, but that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean it's a bestseller. That just means you're number one of the 2 books in that category at the time that have been published in the last 30 days. So lots of people get discouraged because their book doesn't do well than what they think would be well, but actually it's doing exactly the same as everybody else's. But that doesn't mean the book can't work really, really well for them. So that would be my final parting words, so to speak.
I love that. I love that it's, I love most the idea of it opening doors for opportunities, for speaking, for media, for interviews and engagements, and even partnerships. I think there's a nice opening for that a book like that can create. So thank you so much, Tim, for sharing your time with us. I really appreciate you being here. And your British accent is going to rub off on me, and I'm going to be speaking like fairly British everywhere I go. So, thank you so much.
Are you going to finish the Scottish book anytime soon?
So. Yes, I am. As a matter of fact, I had to bump off a meeting, sadly, with a new acquaintance I have met, who's going to help me move it along. So that will be good. And I came across her because of her podcast. So I watched her podcast live, and it was all about book writing and such. And I was like, right, I'm on it. So you'll be happy to know, all last weekend, I was deep into my book, and your point about having to dust it off and get back into it is very heavy, intensive labor. But that's kind of the thing. Like once you get into it, then you're stuck in that world again, and it's a good stuck because now you feel like you've got momentum. So that's a long way to say I feel very encouraged about being unstuck. My 1.5 years of feeling stuck.
I know it's hard. I mean, I've got a book idea I'm kind of a bit stuck on at the moment, so I think I'll be trying to get that done by the end of the year as well. So.
Oh, somebody said something to us. Monica says, great job. Hey, Monica. Thanks so much for joining. Maria, Monica, others who will watch on the replay, thank you so much. And Tim, I will let you get your much needed jet lag rest. We really appreciate you coming on and doing this with us. It was great.
Thanks so much for having me on the show, Andrea. It's been great to talk to you today.
You too. Have a good one.
Bye.